Is that the resolution of the Senate be disagreed to, and I call the honourable member for Watson.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I move an amendment that all words after that be omitted with a view to substituting the following words: "The House concurs with the resolution of the Senate," and that will be seconded by the member for Mayo. I acknowledge the member for Mayo as the seconder, which obviously will happen at the conclusion of my speech, because this has come to the Senate from the Senate and was originally moved by members of Centre Alliance of her party. I should, after what the minister just said, I should explain what the resolution actually says. The resolution, first of all, notes a finding from the Royal Commission, a finding from the Royal Commission that I will say I don't agree with, because the finding, this particular recommendation, is one that would in fact undo the original agreement of the Murray-Darling Basin plan, and that is that the additional 450 gigalitres be achieved through general tender buyback. Now, a lot of people will say that is the most efficient way to get the water, and my original premise that I took to the negotiations when they took place was for that water to be attained through buyback. The exact people who the minister referred to that we needed to be listening to are the people who persuaded me, including the state ministers at the time, that additional water of that nature should be obtained through on-farm infrastructure projects, that's how that water should be obtained. So this resolution simply notes that recommendation. If it asked the parliament to back that recommendation, I'd be recommending that we vote against it, because it would be a breach of the agreement, it would be a breach of the plan. But it doesn't ask that, it simply notes that recommendation. What the resolution before us does ask the parliament to endorse is a call on the federal government to support the urgent repeal of the cap on buyback, the 1,500 gigalitre limit on buyback. Now, first of all, I say this: when the minister said for the first time we now have agreement between the states on how the plan should be implemented, not strictly true. We had agreement when the plan was introduced. That agreement disappeared for a period while the member for New England was the Minister for Water, and the minister at the table has worked very hard, to his great credit, to get agreement back on track with the states and across the aisle, and I pay tribute to him for that. But it is untrue to say that now is the first time that we've had that sort of agreement. It's not, but it did have to be retrieved, and he's done that work. But the reason I say that is not for, here's a bit of rhetoric, let's have an argument about it, is for this reason. When the original agreement for the plan was put in place, there was no cap on buyback. The cap on buyback was introduced as an election commitment designed by the member for New England, the very person who caused the whole thing to almost collapse. So I don't accept that a promise made by the person who tried so actively to undo the whole plan can be seen as something that is integral to holding the whole thing together. I just can't logically accept that. The second thing is, what does a cap on buyback mean? So when the cap on buyback first went through, the government had just been elected, they had a mandate for it. We didn't oppose it in the Senate on the basis that where it was set was above where the take was expected to get to anyway. So the cap on buyback was something that had a rhetorical value but didn't in fact have any impact in substance. Since that time, we've had two amendments to the plan which were within the parameters of the original agreement. It was said that there would be a Northern Basin review, and it was said that there'd be things called supply measures which would bring the numbers down. The Northern Basin review came back with numbers that I didn't like, that I never expected, but came from the independent authority, was within the parameters of the original agreement, and so we agreed for them to go through a negotiation with the minister. The supply measures, 605 gigalitre reduction in the total amount, and there is some doubt as to the extent to which those supply measures will be fully realised. Now, here's the catch, and this is where the cap on buyback becomes a real issue that will hit the plan in the next few years. If there is a cap on buyback, the states will know they don't have to go hard on delivering the supply measures they've put forward because they've got this seatbelt that says, well, if you don't actually deliver, not much can happen under the plan anyway, because there's a cap on buyback. If the cap is removed, we may well find that we never needed to use it anyway because the pressure will be on the states to deliver those supply measures. That's what will happen, because they will know full well that if they don't deliver, buyback becomes a live option. But what incentive is there on the states, other than how much Commonwealth money do they get to take, if they know whether or not they deliver the supply measures, that the Commonwealth has no recourse because there's a statutory limit on buyback? Now, all of this has a real outcome. The supply measures, and the reason that the numbers were allowed to be reduced was because they provide effective ways of delivering under the plan equivalent environmental outcomes using less water. They provide the exact sort of outcomes that the minister was saying we should be able to do to listen to the communities. So whether they're fully delivered or not matters. But the reason we need them to be fully delivered is because they go to the health of the basin. And we need to get right back to first principles here. Why did the Keating government set up a ministerial council? Why did the Howard government put the Water Act in place? Why did the Gillard government put in place a Murray-Darling Basin plan? And why, under the Turnbull government, did this minister work so hard to keep it alive? And the reason is because the major river system on our continent is at risk of collapse. There are no jobs on dead rivers. If you have ecological collapse, the communities don't get their agricultural water, they don't get their drinking water, and you get all the knock-on impacts from that. And if you think ecological collapse is an exaggeration, then look at the summer we've just had. The need for the plan to be fully delivered is real. And this cap now creates a disincentive for the states to deliver those supply measures. So please, don't come in here and argue that this is an attempt to have buyback all over the place, because the plan doesn't allow that. I ruled that out, and with respect to the 450 gigalitres, it doesn't allow a drop of that to be through general tender buyback. But those supply measures will only be delivered if the states have an incentive to deliver them. And if they don't deliver them, and there's a cap on buyback, the river just takes the cut. The ecological collapse that we saw over summer becomes an annual event. And don't think it can't happen because we've watched the beginnings of it happen. This is no ordinary drought. The inflows are dropping, and as the inflows to the basin are dropping, the extent to which what once was simply an over-allocation now becomes an over-extraction that imperils the future of the rivers. So I won't accept the argument that somehow, by keeping to the original plan, we're playing a political game. I won't accept that, can't accept that, and ultimately, no matter how much we negotiate back and forth across the aisle, the rivers have commenced negotiating back, and they are the most uncompromising of all. The most uncompromising of all. So I urge members to vote for the amendment that I've moved and that the member for Mayo will second. I urge members, even if you hope that total buyback never goes beyond where the current cap is, by removing the cap you guarantee the supply projects will happen. Now, I know people will go to their electorates and will want to run a different argument, but can I tell you, this plan was put in place to make sure that the rivers are restored to health, and it's done in a way that works with communities. The cap on buyback is the one part of this that was nothing more than an election commitment concocted by the member for New England.